Hello again. We're ready to start chapter 8. In the last chapter, Mel is telling a story from several years ago when her mother was still alive and they'd taken a walk and found something very unusual, a dead grizzly bear. And they went up and looked at it and touched it and thought it was a very special experience. So now we're going to go into chapter 8, and chapter 8 does have some pictures in it, and it shows the pictures of animals that live in Glacier up in Montana, and the grizzly's right here with the bump between its shoulders. And before we go on, I wanted to tell you a fun story about this animal here. It's the bald eagle. And yesterday, right here in Colorado, right in Denver, I went down to Chatfield with my husband, and there is an eagle's nest, a bald eagle's nest there right along the road. It has a huge nest. They say their nests are 12 feet across and can weigh as much as a car. And there are 2 adult eagles there, and they're sitting on a nest. And the rangers have protected it. So bald eagles live here in Colorado. So that's just kind of a fun story. So anyway, I'm going to start this chapter, and we'll see how far we get today. Chapter 8. The next morning, August 7th, in the cabin. Mel woke up to the smell of eggs and toast. Kevin was gone. He left his stuffed alligator tucked in next to Mel. Mel threw on her jeans and sweatshirt and padded into the kitchen. Mel had finished breakfast and was busily drawing a picture. "Look, Melly," he cried. "It's a picture of me and my Wolverine beating up a mean grizzly." Mel kissed his head and looked over her shoulder at his scribbles. Somehow, Kevin had turned last night's terror into a thrilling adventure. She wished she was a little kid again. Pops looked tired too. Mel doubted he'd closed his eyes last night, but he smiled as he served her a plate heaping with scrambled eggs and buttery toast. There was a knock at the door. They all jumped a little before a familiar voice said, "Hello?" "Aunt Cassie," Kevin said gleefully. "Come in," Pop answered. A moment later, the door swung open and Aunt Cassie appeared. With her yellow and pink dress and her green suitcase in hand, Aunt Cassie looked like a flower, a 6-foot flower with round glasses and an afro. Mel's throat tightened. The last time she'd seen Aunt Sally was at Mom's funeral in December. Aunt Cassie had written Mel about 10 letters since then, but Mel hadn't written back. She never knew what to say, and now she felt ashamed. She couldn't even look at Aunt Cassie. But before Mel knew it, Aunt Cassie's arms were around her. "I missed you so much," she said. She put her hand on Mel's cheek, so Mel had no choice but to gaze at her. And to Mel's surprise, there wasn't even a flicker of anger in Aunt Cassie's eyes, just the usual love and maybe a touch of sadness. Somehow that split-second look between her and Aunt Cassie was more than 100 letters could be. "And you, little man," Aunt Cassie said to Kevin, "you've grown at least a foot." Kevin hopped up and hugged her around the legs. "So," Aunt Cassie said when Kevin finally let go, "who wants to tell me what happened here?" She pointed to the cabin door, or what was left of it. The wood on the door was cracked, the hinges bent. It had deep scratches in it from the bear claws. "A grizzly came here," Kevin cried. "It wanted to eat me, but I was brave." Aunt Cassie looked at Mel and at Pops. "Believe it or not, that's exactly what happened," Pops said. Pops poured Aunt Cassie some coffee, and they told her the whole story. Aunt Cassie listened with wide eyes. "I've never heard of a grizzly acting like that," she said when they were finished. And Aunt Cassie knew as much about grizzlies as Pop and Mel did, because she also had been coming to Glacier her whole life. Aunt Cassie and Mom actually met here as little girls splashing around in Lake McDonald. They told Mel all about the adventures they had together. The craziest ideas were always Mom's. She and Aunt Cassie would hike all day to find secret waterfalls or fishing holes. Sometimes they'd get lost and stagger home smudged with dirt and covered with scratches as the sun was coming down. But of course, that was half the fun. Now Aunt Cassie lived in Chicago. She was a writer of all different magazines. She'd even won some prizes. Mom was so proud of her. Mel moved her chair toward Aunt Cassie. Both being close to her made Mel feel calmer, but she still shuddered as she pictured that grizzly's claws aimed right at Kevin's face. "That bear, it was like a monster," Mel said. It sure was, Pop agreed. There had to be something wrong with it. What did the Rangers say? Aunt Cassie asked. Nothing yet, Pop said, clearing Kevin's plate. I called earlier, but there was no answer. They must be busy with the fires. I plan to stop by the station later, but first I want to go to town and get a lock for the front door, just to be sure. Mel looked at Cassie and then at Pops. What if Aunt Cassie and I go to the station? She said. I can tell them what happened. She wanted the Rangers to do something about the bear now. Cassie's face brightened. Sounds good to me, she said. I'm curious to hear what they'll say. That's fine, Pop said. Then he turned to Kevin. Let's go, Wolverine boy. We're going to town. Ice cream, said Kevin. On the way out the front door, Mel eyed the deep, jagged scratches on the wood. It looked like a maniac with an axe had tried to chop the door down, and there was a tangled clump of brown fur in the corner of the porch. Mel shivered, even though the day was warm, and followed Aunt Cassie out to the car. Chapter 9. 10 minutes later, Aunt Cassie and Mel pulled into the parking lot at the Lake McDonald Ranger Station. It was just a small log building, but within 3 miles from the cabin. They waited in line behind a young man with a mop of brown hair and a beard. He was paying for a trail map. When he was finished, Aunt Cassie stepped back and gave Mel a little nudge toward the counter. Mel stepped up. The ranger gave her a kindly smile. He didn't look much younger than Pops. What can I do for you, young lady? He asked. Mel felt nervous, like when her teacher called on her. But she took a breath. My phone. But she took a breath and looked the man in the eye. I live down the lake in one of the cabins, she said. A grizzly bear came out of the woods last night and followed me up to the cabin. And then it smashed the window and tried to break down our door, and the ranger held up his hands. Let me guess. A skinny bear? Light brown? Long claws? Mel glanced back at Aunt Cassie, who raised her eyebrows in surprise. That's the one, Mel said. How did you know? We call that bear Old Slim, the ranger said. People have been complaining about him all summer. He's a real troublemaker, been raiding campgrounds, making a mess of people's garbage cans, stealing people's food. Harmless, though. Mel felt her cheeks turn red. What was this man saying? Hadn't he heard what she just told him? Harmless, Mel said. The bear almost ripped our door off the hinges, and the memory of the grizzly's paw only inches from Kevin's face flashed across her mind. She pinched her index finger and thumb close together. And it was this close to my tearing little brother, from tearing my little brother to shreds. Aunt Cassie put a hand on Mel's shoulder. Mel realized she was on her tippy toes, leaning over the counter. She let out a breath and tried to step back. She didn't want to be rude, but she needed the ranger to understand. The ranger nodded. That old Slim's a real rascal. A few days ago, he chased a couple of boys to the Trout Lake campground, wrecked their tent, bit right through with a couple of cans of chili, ate a whole pack of wieners in one bite. The ranger chuckled. Excuse me, Aunt Cassie said, stepping closer to the counter herself. I'm not sure that's funny about this grizzly. Mel heard something over her shoulder and noticed that the young man was lurking just inside the door, listening. Were she and Aunt Cassie making too big a fuss? The rangers need to do something about this bear, Aunt Cassie went on, her voice raising sharply. The ranger's cheek turned pink. There's nothing I can do, miss. I'm just a volunteer. He pointed to the symbol on his shirt and shrugged. Most of the rangers are dealing with the fires. He patted Mel's hand. I'm sorry you were scared, kiddo, but I wouldn't worry about the grizzly. Mel's temper flared up again because she was pretty sure she should be worried. Can you at least tell us why it's acting like that, Mel asked. Do you think I could have done something? I wasn't there, the ranger said, but from the other stories, it sounds like this bear he's just a little off. Like I said, I wouldn't worry about it. Then he stepped back from the counter. He was done with this conversation. Mel was fuming as they walked back to the parking lot. They were almost to the car when a voice called to them. Wait! It was the young man with the beard. He hurried over. You're right about that, Grizzly, he said to Mel, catching his breath. It's dangerous, very dangerous. Aunt Cassie and Mel waited to hear more. And it's not just that one bear. There's a big problem here at Glacier. If something isn't done soon, somebody's going to get killed. That is the end of that chapter, chapter 9. I wonder why the volunteer ranger just said it was nothing. He obviously did not quite understand, did he? All right, so that's the end of chapter 9, and then we're going to start a new one. So I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.